Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about quick assessment for synchronous sessions. This is especially designed for teachers who are teaching in-class and online students at the same time. So these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in this session. But basically, we're going to be looking at ways that you can assess students who are in your class and at home at the same time. And we're talking more about formative assessments at this point. So let's take a look at some of them. One of the things that I saw when I was doing my research for this session is this quote. And I think that it is definitely true. I think that you've got a lot of ideas about how you do assessment that you've used over the time that you've been teaching. You don't need to completely change those things. What you want to do is think about ways to make them work virtually. And one of the things that we often do is we often think, well, I'm going to have to use some sort of a tool. You don't necessarily have to use some new tool that's unusual, that's different to you, that you feel like you've got to figure out. You might want to use tried and true methods. Just think about, how can I get this to my students at home and in my classroom at the same time? If you do choose to use apps, perhaps you've always given quizzes, so you'd like to use something like Quizlet, which makes that a little bit easier. Introduce those apps very slowly and very purposefully. Don't introduce one on Monday and introduce another one on Tuesday. Introduce one and stick with it for 2 to 3 weeks so that students can really get used to how it works, what the feedback's going to be like. Too many tools can definitely confuse both you and the students, and that's the last thing that you want to do when you're trying to assess students. So let's look at some things that work, and I'm going to turn off my webcam at this point so that you can see everything on my screen. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is one little thing in Google Classroom that people don't always know about. You probably know in Google Classroom that you can use quizzes and you can use questions as quick assessments. A quiz is simply going to allow you to make an assignment and then go in and edit a multiple choice quiz or whatever type of quiz you want to create in Google Forms, and then that will be available for your students to take. A question allows them to enter an answer to a question, then read what their peers have to say. Well, there's a second part of questions that teachers don't use very often, but this is an interesting way to get a quick check on your whole class at once. In Google Classroom, under the Add a Question, Create a Question, there's actually a multiple choice option, and you can type in your multiple choice question and then your options. And then when the students are taking it, what they'll see is just a simple one question multiple choice item. If you say that students can see the class summary, then as soon as they've answered, it will go to a list, sort of like a poll, and show all of the answers, and the kids will be able to see, what their peers have answered. You'll be able to see who answered and which way they answered. So it's a pretty simple thing to do, and we're going to take a look at where you find that. If I go to my classwork in my test class, so I'm on the classwork tab, and I do create and question, multiple choices right here. Here's where I type my question, here are my options, and this is the students can see the class summary. So I would ask that question, students would answer, and we would be able to proceed. The next thing that we're going to talk about is some of the strategies where we ask everyone in the class to answer. And you've probably done this in your classroom often, having your kids give you thumbs up or thumbs down, or having them do a 1 to 4 understanding rating. There's all kinds of different everyone answers strategies. We can use these when we are doing in-class and online instruction at the same time. If your online learners have their cameras on, they could hold their thumbs up or show their fingers or whatever, the same way that your in-class students are doing. If they don't, you could actually ask them to do this in chat. So they could type 1 to 4 in chat when you ask a question while your in-class learners are showing you 1 to 4 on their fingers. They could do thumbs up, thumbs down in the same way by typing a U for up or a D for down into chat. And one of the ways that you can kind of do a multiple choice class activity is by having your questions on your slides or on whatever sort of a document you are using to project your class. And then in your classroom, students could have ABCD cards that they hold up, And your online students could type ABCD into the chat. So all of these are ways that you can have the entire class answer at once, and you can assess the group's understanding pretty quickly. Another idea is to use paper and pencil quick check tasks. And this is something that's probably familiar to many of you. I've listed a number of different ideas. There are more in EduProtocols and at Project Zero Thinking Routines. That's from Harvard. So all of these are just ways that you can have students use paper to sort of crystallize their thinking, write out the things that they understand, what they want to know more about, draw a picture to show their understanding, and then they can actually either submit a picture of their paper to you if they're online, or they can hold up their paper to their camera and you can see it that way. There's a variety of different ways to do this, but this is a good way to have everyone in class and online thinking and writing at the same time. Which brings us to one of the things that many teachers have used over the years, and that is the infamous pop quiz. Pop quizzes are a thing that many teachers thought had sort of gone by the wayside when we went into this remote blended learning type of model. But you can still do this if this is part of your teaching strategy. And you can do this if you just want to sort of get an idea of how your students are doing. So you can offer paper copies to your in-class students. One of the things that teachers have often said they don't like is if they put a quiz into their Google Classroom, students know that it's coming if it is visible, or they have to remember to go back and they have to remember to make it visible to students right before they tell the class about it. Well, you can do either of those things. You can also, though, simply hand it out to your online students using the Google copy trick. And this sounds really confusing at first, but it isn't. What you're going to be doing is simply taking the web address of your Google document and changing a small bit of it at the end to the word copy. So if you see here, I have an address to my document, and right now it says sharing. Well, I don't really want to have editing and sharing as part of what I'm doing here. So I would just eliminate this. I would take this right off and I'd type in the word copy. And then if I paste my edited link into the chat, it's going to make a copy for my students and they are going to be able to move on from there. Show you what I mean by that. So here is a quiz, a quick little quiz that I have that's just on states of matter. And if I go to share, I can copy the link to this. And now here is my quiz. And I'm going to go to my chat. So this is sort of a make-believe activity. Let's say this is my class meet chat that's happening. I would paste this in, but before I hit share, or enter, I should say, before I did anything like that to send this to my students, while I'm in my chat, I would simply highlight this part, everything from edit to the end, and I would replace it with the word copy. Now, what's going to happen if I paste this into chat and then a student clicks on it, and I'm kind of having to mess around a little bit to show you how this works. But if a student clicks on this from chat, it is going to go to this page where it says, would you like to make a copy of this? If I say, sure, I'd like to make a copy, it is going to give me a copy of this document for me to write on. So I am the only one who can see this. This is now mine, and I can answer these questions and then submit it to a Dropbox in Google Classroom, and the teacher will have it. So doing a pop quiz is still a possibility if that is something that you have done with your students. A few other tips are using small group work as assessment is something that we've always done. We've given small groups a task to do together and then asked them to share out. You can still do this when you're working with online and in-person students at the same time. It's a great idea to consider mixing your in-class and online students when you're assigning a group. This is good because then you've got students in the classroom who are part of the group who can communicate a lot of the things that are going on in the classroom to the online students. And they're able to sort of bring them in and make them be part of the classroom in a more realistic way than they are when they're simply listening to what's happening in the classroom. Having students use some way of capturing their learning is important so that you can go back and look at the artifacts of that learning. So you can use Jamboard or Google Slides or anything like that. And you may want to consider assigning roles to your students. It's a great idea to have one of your online students be the group reporter. And then at the end of the group time, when they're sharing out, you can actually have that student's screen projected onto your smartboard or your whiteboard or whatever it is that you're using to project things in your classroom. And all of their peers will be able to see them as they present. And the final thing, of course, is using exit tickets is still a great idea. There are a lot of ways that you can do this. You can have kids, do it on paper or email you or answer a form, whatever you would like to do. And I have put some prompts here that you could use to see what the students are learning and what you need to plan to do more work on. So this has been a very quick look at some of the different assessment opportunities. And I hope that you have enjoyed this time. And I thank you for taking 10 minutes to do this. And we hope to see you in another session again soon.